An unrequited childhood love. Since childhood, Jay Brown and I have been inseparable. We live next door to each other, literally a stone's throw away from one another. So it was a given that when our mothers gave birth only weeks apart, we would be best friends for life. We played together as toddlers and even had some joint birthday celebrations through the years. Our preschool and grade school days only strengthened what has already been a solid dynamic. In our early years, our parents even took turns driving us to school. If Mr. Brown drove us to school on Monday, then my dad would do so on Tuesday, and so on. It was safe to say that we were like peas in a pod, and we shared a bond so rare for non-blood relatives to have. As the years went by, our friendship also evolved. Entering high school is a polarizing experience. Some absolutely adore it, likely because of their friends and their popularity. Others despise it, possibly because they become outcasts or just dread that there is so much socialization required. I fell somewhere in between, relishing my time there because my friends, especially Jay. He was a varsity player on Roseville High's basketball team, so we instantly climbed the social ladder as he befriended the so-called kings of the school. While he was always busy with practice during the day, nighttime was ours. He had never made me feel left out despite our contrasting social groups in school. I was not considered an outcast, but I definitely did not hold a candle to his popularity. Regardless, he made me feel welcomed in his circle, and even went out of his way to include me in their hangouts. In our junior year, I became editor-in-chief of Roseville Times, our school paper. After I took on this big responsibility, the mounting expectations of the people around me got to my head at times, so Jay became my solace. After his practice, he would find me on our porch, typing away on my laptop and stressing over the next news article we were to publish. "Look at you with your scrunched forehead and all cute," he remarked. "How's my favorite writer doing?" I blushed at his comments. He often bestowed flattering words, which I never failed to give me butterflies. "All good, just proofreading our next issue," I replied. "How are you, champ?" "I figured. I checked your weekly schedule and saw you'll be working on your paper, so I bought us food." "I'm good, by the way," he said. "Practice just ended, so I'll shower and then come over." I continued to work on my paper while I waited for him, and when he returned, he scooped up beside me. He always kept close to me when we studied together, or even on nights that he did not have assignments to do while I had a paper to edit. He would sit adjacent to me. We could be dead silent, only our breathing and the occasional noise in the background, but I would be content having him by my side was enough. "Got your favorite, orange chicken," he announced. "Ah, you know the way to my heart," I replied as I took a bite of the food. He simply stared at me while I ate a few bites, his eyes glistening with admiration. "I sure do," he affirmed. For the rest of the afternoon, we did our homework side by side. When it got too dark, we went into the Browns' dining area. Jay's parents were out of town, so we had the house to ourselves. His sister was living in a dorm in the east as she was in college already. We then continued working side by side in the dining area. Later on, Jay would finish his homework early, but he continued to keep me company through the long night. "Coffee?" he asked thoughtfully as he let out yet another sigh. I nodded, pouting slightly. He laughed at my disheveled appearance and messed up my already unruly hair. "Thank you, JJ. You're the best," I said as he handed me a cup of steaming coffee. He stayed by my side that night as I soldiered on through the issue that I was editing. Every now and then, I would lean towards him and just enjoy his presence as a break. He smiled whenever I did this and ran his hands softly through my hair. I would close my eyes and enjoy the moment. Just him and me. No one else mattered. A few days later, I got home extremely upset because our latest issue that I'd worked so hard on had gotten rejected. That meant I was in for another long night of editing. I almost entered our house without dropping by at the Browns because I was too worn out from the day's happenings. To aggravate matters, Jay was excused from his classes today as he had a scrimmage with his team at a nearby school. That meant I was not able to see him that day. There must be an invisible string connecting him and me because just as I was about to enter my house, Jay emerged from his and his face lit up upon spotting me. "Alfie," he called out. "Not gonna say hi to your best bud?" My day was instantly brightened upon seeing him. "JJ," I hollered. "I don't know you were home yet. Bad day, sorry. I had no energy to come over." "I'll be over in 5 and you can tell me about it," he replied. True to his word, he came over in less than 5 minutes. To my surprise, he even had iced coffee in his hand and a plate of cookies. He never failed to exceed my expectations, and it seemed like he knew me better than I knew myself. Jay never failed to cheer me up and went to great extents to make me feel loved. "Jay, thank you," I whispered softly as he plopped down on the couch next to me. "You always know how to make things better." "What makes you think this is for you?" he joked as he hid the food and drink from me momentarily. "Kidding, of course." "Boo. Any time for you." You know I hate to see my best boy sad. Now spill. I then ranted to him about how terrible my day had been, and as always, he was an excellent listener who gave me his input at the right times and provided wonderful advice. I leaned against him as I vented and went back and forth between the cookies and the coffee. It was always such a nice feeling talking to someone whom you knew genuinely cared about you. You're doing great, eh? I know the criticisms about your writing may be tough, but you're tougher. You'll only keep improving. I know it, said Jae. And I'll be right here, supporting you every step of the way. I glanced at him and I felt my heart melt at the sight of him. I was so blessed to have a friend like him. Thank you, Jae. You know what would make you feel even better? He asked. Cuddles, we replied in unison. With that, I finished up the food and put one of my comfort movies, Mean Girls. It was corny, but it was so familiar and I always put it on when I had a bad day. I cuddled up on Jae's side, although this seemed very intimate and to some extent it was. We did not mind. It was a regular occurrence for us to do this when we were certain that no one was around. I loved Jae's warmth. He had a big muscular body, but his touches were so light and delicate. I appreciated his comforting and soothing strokes down my arm. I did not know someone so big could be so gentle. In his embrace, I felt at home, and after I felt his soft lips on my forehead, my day turned completely around. A few weeks later, the date for the junior prom was officially announced. Naturally, almost the entire junior class was buzzing with excitement. It would be my first time to attend the prom and I was looking forward to it. Not because of the occasion itself, but because I would be covering the event so I could write about it in our school paper. Jae and I had not spoken much about it, except that he mentioned that he was going with his teammates who did not have a date. He said he wanted me to tag along if I was free. I agreed because I could never cover the event and have fun concurrently. However, weeks after our exchange, I overheard one of the girls in the hallways talking about Jae. You know that basketball player? Tall, dark, and handsome? Jae. Brown? A high-pitched voice said. It was Nancy Lee, a fellow junior who was always rumored to have a crush on Jae. When I first heard of her hearsays, I ignored them because Jae himself said he was not interested in her. I did not push further, afraid that I might not like what I hear if I inquired further about who he was indeed interested in. Oh yeah, what about him? Asked one of Nancy's friends. Replied. I heard he's going to ask me out, replied Nancy in a whisper. I walked away swiftly before the girls could spot me, and my heart was beating very heavily in my chest. Did Jae lie when he said that he was not interested in her? Did he really ask a girl out after reassuring me that having no date was perfectly fine, and that we could relish the night with our friends? We walked home together after my last class. As always on Fridays, Jae finished practice early and was waiting for me outside my classroom. I did not greet him and gave him a cold shoulder throughout the walk. At first, he was oblivious to my sour mood and kept going about his day as usual. What's wrong, eh? He finally asked when we reached my doorstep. You haven't uttered a word. Did I do something wrong? I let out a heavy sigh. When were you planning to tell me that you'll be asking Nancy Lee out for prom? You asked me to go with you and suddenly you invite a girl? Are you serious, Jae? You didn't even bother telling me. He looked horrified that I had found out and my heart sunk. It was true. I was going to tell you because you're my best friend and I tell you everything. But I was hoping I didn't have to do it, believe me. I was finding a way out of it first, so I didn't tell you yet, he explained. What do you mean? I questioned. It was a bet, he explained, between the basketball guys. I lost, so they dared me to ask Nancy Lee out for prom. I never wanted to ask her, never had any interest in her. I did not say anything and simply looked at him, prompting him to say more. Was this the moment that we've been waiting for? All the anticipation building up over the years might come down to this moment, and it did. I looked him in the eye only to find him staring at me, his gaze shifting to my lips. In unison, we moved towards each other and shared a kiss. It was sweet, and nothing like I have ever experienced. Our lips felt like a glove, as if we were made for each other. When we broke apart, he held my face on his hand, and he looked me dead in the eye. I've never had any interest in her, because I've only ever been interested in... But before we could finish the sentence, Jae's father shouted at us from across the yard. We were caught red-handed. Get away from my son, Alfred! What are you two doing? In broad daylight? What a disgrace! Mr. Brown hollered. For the most part, Mr. Brown had always been nice, although he and my dad seemed to have tension between them. Jared Brown had always been nice to me, up until this moment. Jae and I quickly broke apart, while Jared stormed towards our yard. He quickly stepped in front of Jared, as if protecting him from me. My heart sank. Did he think I was a threat to his son? You're a kid that I've always admired from your youth because you're supposed to be the sensible and smart one. And now I see you here kissing my son? Jared confronted me. Jae attempted to reach for me, only to be stopped by his dad, who took him by the arm. Dad, I kissed Alfie, Jae replied. It's not his fault, we both wanted it. Jared lifted a hand, shushing his son. You don't know what you're talking about. Alfred probably manipulated you into kissing him. This is not you. You'll be ruining your career if you engage with this gay man further. I was crying at this point, hurt that Jared would think of me differently just because his son and I kissed. To make matters worse, my father had arrived in time to hear Jared going off at me, and was clearly enraged by how I was being screamed at. How dare you refer to Alfie as a gay man? You are in no position to dictate my son's sexuality, you insufferable judgmental man. My dad, Amiel, shouted. He stood in front of me, similar to how Jared was in front of Jae. Both fathers were clearly taking a protective stance. You tolerate your son's unacceptable behavior? And that's why he's now influencing my son to do the same? Your son is a bad influence to Jae, and I will not allow it, accused Jared. Jae attempted to defend once more, but was quickly shut down by his father's loud voice. Don't call my son a bad influence. If anything, it would be your son who is influencing Alfie to do nonsense and rebellious acts. My son is by no means gay. Maybe yours is, so recheck your steps of parenting, Jared yelled before storming off with Jae. Jae looked back at me helpless, as if wanting to hug me. I understood his predicament, especially with our fathers looming over us. It was evident that they were against us kissing. My dad was glaring at me, as if wanting me to explain. Yes, me and Jae kissed, Dad, I admitted. My father shook his head and reprimanded me for the consequences of my actions. How can you do this, Alfie? I've always perceived you as the responsible one. Really? Kissing Jae right in front of our doorstep? For the whole world to see? Are you out of your mind? He berated. You're grounded for the whole week. It's spring break next week anyways. No going out, no phones, nothing. Defeated, I entered my room and handed my phone to my dad. I was grounded for a week, so this meant not seeing Jae at all. I was in for a long, miserable week. Later in the night, I was reading a book in my room, as I had no phone and no entertainment. There was a beam of light suddenly appearing in my room. It seemed like it was coming from a flashlight outside the house. I opened my blinds and spotted Jae in his room with a flashlight in hand. It seemed like he was purposely doing it to get my attention. I was so downcasted by the afternoon's events that I forgot that we had a means to communicate, since our rooms are right across from each other, and the windows would enable us to speak. Jae, I whispered as I opened the window. I'm so happy to see you. I can't take it. Hours without talking to you. It's been unbearable. Are you okay? Alf, same. I've been miserable and praying that you're okay. I'm fine, just grounded for the entirety of the spring break. This is terrible. Oh my god, same, I exclaimed. I want to be able to touch you and be with you, Jae. This is torture. Don't get me wrong, I'm relieved that I'm talking to you now, but it's not the same. I need to touch you and cuddle with you, and I lingered off. And kiss you, he completed the sentence for me. I nodded, a smile etched on my face. If there was one positive thing that occurred today, it was the two of us kissing and finally, through our actions, admitting the feelings that we had guarded so heavily over the years. Let's sneak out, Jae suggested, between the two of us. He had always been the mischievous one. He was the adventurous one and I was the grandpa between the two of us. More conservative and follow-the-rules type of guy. But I hesitated at first, and then I remembered our predicament for the next week. Okay then. Not wanting to risk getting caught talking through our windows, Jae and I decided to retreat to our bedrooms after agreeing to meet in our back doors at exactly 1 a.m. We did not have any plans, but we knew it was the safe time to meet, as both of our parents would be fast asleep by then. So around 12:55 a.m. I snuck out stealthily down the stairs and into the night. Jae was waiting by the time I reached the back door, and I immediately embraced him. He gave me a bear hug and kissed my forehead. Where to, JJ? I asked. Want to go for a walk and eat? Go old McDonald's? He offered. So we ended up walking side by side to the nearest fast food. The neighborhood was extremely eerie and quiet, but I did not mind. I felt safe in the arms of a man I loved. Eventually, I mustered up the courage and held his hand. I wish we could stay like this forever, I said whimsically. No, I hope not, he said to my surprise. I wish we lived in a world where we need not sneak out, in a world where we can be ourselves. I squeezed his hand in an attempt to comfort him. Throughout that night and into the wee hours of the morning, we had deep talks over ice cream and fries. I learned more about Jae that I did not know before, despite our lifelong friendship. I felt like with each revelation, I fell in love with him more and more. When the clock struck 5 a.m. and we realized that we should be heading back, He watched me and waited for me to get inside my house and safely into my room before he headed back. However, as I was tucking myself back in the bed, I realized that I had not bid him a good night and failed to give him a kiss. Upon this realization, I swiftly headed down the stairs with caution and headed to the yard, only to bump into a strong figure. It was Jae. We laughed hysterically at the realization that we were both heading out again to see one another. "You crazy guy, what are you doing?" I asked, playfully. "I wanted to wish you a good night and give you a kiss," I completed for him, because same. With this, we shared a tender but sincere kiss before bidding each other a good night, and finally heading to bed after a long night of getting to know each other in a whole new level. As I laid in bed that night, I just kept thinking I was in love with my best friend and he was in love with me. But then the reality of it all crashed on me, and I realized that us being in love did not change the fact that our parents mutually hated the idea of us getting together, and it broke my heart. Throughout the week, we continued sneaking out. On Monday, we walked around the neighborhood and ended up in the playground where we used to enjoy together as kids. It was so symbolic as we finally felt like we completed a full circle. We played there as children, and now we were back there as lovers. I could not be happier knowing that I entrusted my heart to someone I have loved since we were in diapers. On Tuesday, we stayed at the backyard. Jae had prepared a surprise for me. He brought a lamp and asked me to bring the book I was currently reading. He had prepared a picnic for us, whipping out fresh fruits and even cookies he baked himself. "Picnic at midnight. Who could have thought?" I said as I popped a strawberry in my mouth. "I wish we could have a picnic in broad sunlight. Can you imagine how nice that would be?" he replied as I rested my head on his lap. He was combing through my hair, his gentle strokes relaxing me. I sat up and popped a grape in his mouth, which he playfully caught. "Ha! Don't test my skills, babe," he said, flexing his muscles. "Got that athlete DNA, you know." I faked rolling my eyes, but he pulled me close to him, and I ended up in his lap. We shared yet another sweet kiss that night, and I could not stop smiling as I tucked myself back to bed. On Wednesday, we got caught. We did not even get a chance to sneak out later that night because in the afternoon, after I went down and saw my parents seated on the dining table, the Browns opposite them. Jae was nowhere to be found, but my father looked distressed. I was surprised that they seemed to be talking calmly before I appeared. I really wanted no drama to ensue between our families, seeing as we were neighbors and besides, we have such a long history. "Alfie, be seated," said my mom softly. "Jae is coming over shortly." I did as I was told, and within the next minute, Jae arrived and sat on the seat opposite me. The tension in the room was thickening, and I could almost hear a pin drop. "You guys have been sneaking around, haven't you?" Mom said calmly. I stared at Jae, and his eyes looked like they were about to pop out of their sockets. We've been extremely discreet, which was why it was so shocking that we had been exposed. "Mom, let me don't deny it anymore, love. I noticed since the very first night you guys did it, but I kept quiet because I saw how happy you two were," she explained. "I heard you coming down the stairs every night since, and forgive me for spying on you guys, but I saw how much joy you bring each other, so I decided to let it go. That's why I've invited Jared and Hannah Brown to discuss you two's adventures." "Mr. and Mrs. Brown, I'm so sorry," I squeaked. "Please don't punish Jae for my foolish behavior. It was my idea to sneak out." "You're really taking the fall for our son, Alfie?" "It's okay, son. Don't explain further," Jared replied. "Your parents and I have been talking since morning about you guys and what you've been doing. Since grounding you two is not enough, clearly, one of us have to move far apart from each other." Fear enveloped my face, and I could see Jae visibly get angry. And then laughter erupted from our parents. "I'm just messing with you, sons," said Jared. "Look, I can't do this, Amiel. You explain the shenanigan." My dad was still chuckling, but composed himself. "Firstly, we want to apologize for the mess of last week. Jared and I admit that we should have spoken to you guys immediately and not let the emotions get the better of us. We should have explained and talked to you guys like adults because your feelings do matter after all." Our parents all nodded, and I cracked a smile at Jae, who was relaxing now. "We were scared, very scared at the thought of you guys finally realizing your feelings for one another," Jae's dad admitted. "Finally realizing," I repeated. "Honey, we're your parents. Of course we noticed how you guys behaved towards one another. At first, we were all in denial, as we thought you were naturally close, as friends or brothers only," my mom explained. "Exactly, but then we realized it's much deeper than that," Jae's mom, Vanessa, added. "You guys love each other." Jae looked down on his lap, knowing full well it was true. "I can't believe that thought scared you, Dad. I never pegged you to be the homophobic type," Jae confessed. Jared looked aghast at his son's words. "Me? Homophobic? Never." I'm sorry that was the impression I gave, and perhaps Amiel also gave off that vibe. We're not homophobics, and we never will be. You have misunderstood us, and again, I want to reiterate that we were terrible at displaying what we truly feel. Our words were misleading, Jared said. We're not against you two dating. We're scared of history repeating itself. You see, when we were in college, Jared and I were a part of a trio. We were as close as you guys. We were brothers for life, my dad added. That's right, Jared said. Me, Amiel, and our friend Charles were inseparable. The same way that you two are. But then Charles passed away because he contracted a disease that was relatively unknown then. What was it? Jay asked. HIV, said my dad and Jared in unison. Your fathers were merely trying to protect you, Vanessa explained. They are idiots for making a scene and not wording their thoughts differently, my mother added. But they care for you and want you to be safe, and that's why they reacted that way. I was at a loss for words. So you guys are not actually against us dating? Jared shook his head vigorously. I want nothing but you guys to be happy, and if that's what makes you happy, I'll wholeheartedly support it. My dad agreed. Agree with Jared, he echoed. We were just scared of history repeating itself, but after some thought and plenty of discussion, we realized that you two are responsible adults. You'll be able to enjoy your relationship without something as irresponsible as protected sex, am I right? Jay and I agreed. With that, our mothers cheered and our fathers shook hands. Finally, I went to Jay's embrace, and he kissed me on the forehead, as he always did. Later that night, Vanessa, aka Mrs. Brown, and my mother cooked a scrumptious meal for all of us to enjoy. The dinner was beyond delicious, and our fathers shared tales of them in college. I was at peace knowing that I was accepted by my family, and the Browns were supportive of us too. Home truly is where the heart is. Unfortunately, all my loved ones were under one roof that night. I was home. The end. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force and stay wholesome.